Great. Thanks so much, Yandi. And thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me tonight. As she said, I'm Jason Cronk. I am Senior Associate Director of Admissions here at the Graduate School of Education at UPenn. We are one of 12 graduate colleges within the university focusing on education and applied social sciences in that field. And tonight, we're really just going to take some time to talk about how you might choose a graduate program, some things to consider, offer you some advice in that sense, and then go through some ways to really make a strong application. So I'm going to share my screen with you in a moment here, and we'll start right away. We'll leave time for some questions and answers. So if you have a question along the way, feel free to type it in the chat box, and I'll address it verbally towards the end of the talk. All right? Thanks so much. Yandi, if you could switch gears, we'll share my screen now. All right. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Yandi, are you able to see the screen? I just want to make sure.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, very good. All right, excellent. So let's get right into it then. Okay, very good. So today we're going to talk about choosing the best program for you. And there are many reasons why you might be considering a graduate degree, and I hope that today's session really helps put your context and gives you some advice for beginning your search. So the first question really is, of course, why? Why pursue graduate education at all? The fact is that you already have a bachelor's degree, and that's sufficient for most jobs. Why do you want to invest the time, energy, and money necessary to pursue graduate education? There are lots of reasons why you might consider this, but they're all important, and they all go into understanding your own personal motivations. Do you hope to make more money, become better at your current job? Maybe you're changing careers or pivoting within a career. Maybe you think everyone else is getting one, and that a master's is just necessary these days. That's what we call degree inflation. And maybe you just want to prove how smart you are. We call that ego, but that's okay. No matter what your motivation, your first step in choosing a program is really taking a candid, honest look at the reasons you want one. Be honest with yourself, because this will influence the type of program you choose. Then take a deeper look at who you are and be candid about that. Be candid about your strengths, your weaknesses, and your motivations. Because part of your application to any U.S. school will be a statement of purpose, which is usually a brief essay describing why you wish to join a particular program. Admissions officers look carefully to see that your interests and abilities are aligned with the program you are seeking. It's helpful to take a candid look at your records. Look at your records the way an objective third party would look at them. So for example, if I read your transcript, what would it tell me? What would it tell me about you? People talk a lot about following their passion, and this is fine, but I would suggest finding a topic that you're passionate about where you already have built in some positive momentum. Let me give you an example. My favorite class in college, when I was taking my undergraduate, one of my favorite classes was an art history class that I took. I took this class as a summer abroad trip in Paris, and it was lovely. It was magical, but I got a C+. And if I had applied to an art history program, somebody looking at my transcript would wonder what preparation I had for a master's degree in art history when I had only taken one class and I didn't really do so well in it. So passion aside, take an objective look at your transcript. And in my case, that would have shown a lot of economics classes. So I ended up getting an MBA, and that's my own trajectory. I would encourage you to do a similar evaluation of your own. Likewise, you're going to ask people for letters of recommendation. You need to ask them to write positive reviews of your academic performance. What would they say? What would other people tell you you're good at? These are just some questions that might help assess, that you might use to help assess yourself and the fit for a given program. And once you've thoroughly evaluated your motivations and abilities, you can begin looking for a program. Now, notice how I'm inversing the normal order of things, because as an undergraduate, you searched for a school and then chose a major. But as a graduate student, you are applying to a program more than a school. The reason is that at most US schools, it is the actual program to which you apply that makes the decisions, not a central admissions office like in the undergrad. And this is really critical to understand. The highest ranked school may not have the highest ranked program in your discipline. So then, therefore, more important than the rank of a program will be the fit of a program to you. And I wonder if everyone understands what I mean by fit. When we say fit, we mean all of the many diverse factors that influence whether a program is the best program for you. Remember that no two programs are identical, even if they have the same name, okay? You need to research to determine how they might be different. For example, many schools offer masters in applied statistics, but Penn GSC's Statistics Measurement and Assessment program is an applied statistics degree focused on education and social sciences. That's a nuance, that's a distinction. Every program is going to have its own special distinction and nuance, and those are the types of things you really need to understand before writing an application. It's going to help you determine the overall fit of the program for you. Now, I wanted to take an aside here to really talk a little bit about choosing between a master's or a doctoral program, because I travel all over the world, and one of the most common scenarios I encounter is a prospective student who tells me that they want a PhD. But when I press them for specifics about their research, they're unsure. They're unsure of their research, and they can't really tell me a focused, cogent question. This tells me that they might not be ready and would benefit instead from a master's degree. So I'm not going to read my slide here, but I've listed some of the main differences between a doctoral program and master's program, at least in the US. And this is really important. So a lot of you might be trying to decide whether you want a master's or a doctoral. These are some things to consider, at least the way a doctoral program is typically structured in the US. One way I can phrase it, so you often hear that the PhD is the terminal degree. It's the highest degree you might get, and that's true. Okay, that is true, but I would phrase it another way. So although it is a terminal degree, a better way to describe it might be as one of our professors describes it, is as entry-level job training for a career in academia and research. It's usually not the most appropriate degree for most people, but if you are searching for a career in academia or a research-focused career, then it may be. For most people, a master's degree is going to yield the more appropriate skill set and a much shorter return on investment, a much more quickly realized return on investment. And so these are just some of the differences that you may want to consider when you're trying to decide between a master's or a doctoral program. And once you've evaluated yourself a little bit, and you've decided on the type of program, then you would start to look at the best school with that type of program. Okay, so once you've taken that candid self-assessment and you've evaluated your own strengths, your own weaknesses, your own passions, your motivations, and you've decided on a program and you've researched the program you want, then you start to look at the school. And I'm suggesting that you select a program at a granular level and then the school at the larger level, at more of a macro level. The program determines the curriculum and the school determines the environment in which you learn that curriculum. And I've listed what I think are the most important factors when choosing a school. Notice what is not listed. What's not listed are rankings. The most important thing for you is going to be the culture, the curriculum, and the community. And what do I mean by the culture of the school? How might you find that out? How would you determine what the culture of the school is? Well, the easiest way is to ask. Ask current students, ask alumni. At Penn, we tend to think of ourselves as having a focus on skills, very professionally oriented. For example, we're the only Ivy League school with a nursing school, and the programs at Penn GSE would give you the competence and confidence to enter any new profession. When you're talking with students and alumni, ask about the opportunities to build relationships with other students in your program and around campus. Graduate school is a great opportunity to build your network because the people in your program are ostensibly going to be working in your field. Ask about the ratio of grad to undergrad at the school too. This might hint at the relative amount of resources the school dedicates to grad students. I go all over the world, like I said, and a lot of times at different universities, I'll see graduate students are sequestered off into their own little grad center, and it's kind of lonely over there. But at Penn, we're over 50% graduate students. So our grad students receive comparable resources as our undergrads would as well. And so let's take a step back for a moment and think about some of the reasons you might want to study in the US at all. With over 5,400 universities and colleges, the US has a school to meet anyone's goals, motivations, and budgets. I've listed some of the criteria that you would look at there, and what I mean by these. So by subject, I mean that in the US, what you studied as an undergraduate does not dictate what you will study as a master's student. For example, although we are a school of education, most of our students study something other than education as undergraduates. Likewise, our faculty are experts in topics ranging from statistics to anthropology to linguistics, and they bring that expertise to bear on some facet of education. That's why we're the school of education. But US schools offer graduate degrees that can be pursued on a full-time, part-time, or executive format. So when we talk about duration, we're really talking about the schedule at which you might, and the pace at which you might pursue a degree. Does everybody know what I mean by executive format? Executive format, I know that it may not exist in every country. So an executive formatted program is a program that is full-time academically, but meets on a condensed schedule to allow you to continue working. So for example, we have a program in education entrepreneurship that meets once per month, Friday through Sunday in class. When you're looking at US schools and you're looking at programs at US schools, it's important to understand what the terms mean when they're describing their duration and the type of that way. So when you're talking about location, the US, as you can see on my little map there, the US is huge, okay? US schools are found in rural, urban, coastal, mountainous, tropical, subarctic, all types of different locations. Wherever you want to study, you can find a preferred environment. And that's really important too. Of course, looking at location is a critical piece of understanding what type of program you might want to be, what type of program you might want to pursue. And then of course there's price. Now, the rumor is that US schools are all very expensive, but the truth is that US schools vary considerably in not just their price, but also the amount of aid that is offered to students, and especially to international students. It's a sort of rule of thumb, and it might sound a bit counterintuitive, but quite often the schools with a higher sticker price, okay, often can afford to give more in scholarship. You'll see this a lot in a difference between public schools and private universities, where public universities tend to have a lower starting price, but fewer students receive scholarship. Whereas at private universities, we tend to have a higher starting price, but more of our students receive scholarship. Penn GSE, for example, automatically evaluates all incoming students, both foreign and domestic, for merit scholarships. And this is a really great benefit of having the ability to control our own funds that way. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to transition a little bit too, because when I speak with students here and around the world, a big question we often get, or we often get a lot of questions regarding return on investment, right? And part of choosing the best program is understanding the return on investment and what that means. And this is an exceedingly complicated subject that's really worthy of its own seminar. So in the few minutes I have this evening, I'm just going to offer some suggestions on making a useful analysis, okay? And first and foremost, it's important to understand what we're talking about here, because a master's degree really is an investment in yourself. It's an investment in your ability to perform in your chosen field of work, okay? So it's an excellent idea to ask schools where their graduates are working and what resources they offer to help them find employment. Penn, for example, has a dedicated career services office that hosts many events and provides one-on-one counseling to help them find the best career fit for you. But it gets a bit problematic when you're trying to compare post-graduation salaries with the cost of a program. And that's because while the cost of a program and the quality of instruction is more or less fixed, students will vary considerably in terms of interests, goals, and motivation, not to mention life circumstances. Whereas the cost of a given program is fixed, student variability is very high. And so the main takeaway I would offer is that graduate school is an investment in yourself returned over a lifetime. Most of you will have careers for the next 30, 40, maybe even 50 years. So it's important to think of that in the long term. And then to really understand that the main determinant of salary will be the industry in which you work. So for example, not to be too candid, but a mediocre, half-motivated heart surgeon is still going to make more than the most talented plumber, even though they both perform important necessary work. But this highlights my point. Simply comparing what the quote-unquote average graduate makes will not tell you very much about the quality of the program. It may influence which type of program you choose, whether to be a surgeon or a plumber, for example, but within your chosen profession, it's you. You make a tremendous difference. So a highly motivated, well-trained educator will do better in his or her career than one who has not invested in himself. So when you're thinking about the value of a given program, consider that way. Consider how you will be set up compared with the peers in your field, okay? It's that last aspect that you have the most control over, that investment in yourself. So some other things to consider when you're thinking about the value of a given program, consider the relationships you'll build. That goes back to what I was describing when looking at the school. What is the culture? What is the community like at that school? Remember the adage, it's not what but who you know. Sadly, that there's some truth to that, but schools will really try to foster the relationships you build in their graduate programs. Talk to alumni, talk to current students about the type of relationships they're able to build to really build the strong network. And the last point I'll mention, what I call here the unknown unknowns. The fact is none of us are omniscient. We can't see the future. And so it's impossible to say what a graduate degree will bring you 20 years from now, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 30 years from now. You get the point. The graduate degree opens doors you may not be aware that even exist. You might not even be aware of these doors that this degree could offer you. And that's what we're really talking about here. So let's try to tie everything together so far. In choosing a graduate program, you've done a self-evaluation. You've considered the fit of a program in terms of the knowledge and skills you will acquire. You've chosen a school based on the culture and community, and you understand that the return on investment has to be considered through the lens of your industry and your own motivation and effort. At that point, once all these other considerations are made, then at that point, price should enter as a factor. And price is important, but I would argue it cannot be the most important factor, because the truth is any program you choose represents a major investment in time, energy, and money. And pursuing the wrong program, or the third best program, would almost be a waste of time, money, and energy. That's why you see so many people with multiple master's degrees, or that are still floundering trying to figure out what they want to do. It's important to dedicate and spend the time on the front end to really choose that strong program. And so once you have chosen that program, or your top several choices, then it's time to really make a strong application. Okay, let's take a few minutes now and talk about putting your best foot forward and really making a compelling application to U.S. graduate schools. And it's important to understand how the U.S. admissions model might differ from other countries. So this slide here, these are the standard components of a graduate school application in the U.S. Applications by school will vary, and so it's really critical to research that each individual school to understand what their specific requirements are. Even more so, because you're applying more to a program than a school, remember I said that earlier, it's important to understand what that program requires. At Penn GSC, we have 22 different master's degrees, and each of them has slightly different admissions criteria, so it's important to understand. Nonetheless, these are the main components you'll encounter, and the main pieces you'll be requested to supply when applying to school. So we'll just take them in turn so you get a good understanding of what you need to do. Transcripts, like I said, transcripts are going to give us a good sense of your overall motivation and your preparation for the graduate degree that you seek. Remember how I gave that example of me having only one art history course out of my entire undergrad. So it might look a little odd for me to apply for an art history master's degree. I still could, but I would have to explain that a lot in my essay. I'd have to explain how I came to this point of wanting to pursue art history when I had only taken one art history class. Most US schools do not have strict cutoff GPAs. That's a very common question we get. Most schools, there is no strict cutoff, okay? And the reason for that, I think this makes intuitive sense when you think about it, because undergraduate curriculums are not all the same, okay? So if you went to a very rigorous school and you studied a very difficult subject, say quantum physics or something, your GPA might be a bit lower than someone who went to a more lenient school studying an easier subject. And so we don't want to have a firm cutoff that's going to disproportionately harm those who took difficult and challenging coursework. So we look at that very carefully as to where you went to school and the subject you studied, and then take that into account. Okay, so in terms of a GPA, most schools are not going to have a fixed cutoff. Some do. That's important to understand, but most do not. Likewise with standardized test scores. At Penn GSC, the only cutoff we have, so to speak, would be for the TOEFL or IELTS. We accept both. Many US schools accept both, but definitely check with any school you're interested in. We would want, for example, to see a score of about 100 on your TOEFL as a minimum score. But regarding the GRE, most schools look at GREs the same way they look at your transcripts. They want to see that you have the preparation, that you've prepared adequately for a graduate course. So at GSE, for example, most of our students, and we publish what the average scores are. Those are ranges, those are averages, they're certainly not cutoffs. Most students are scoring somewhere in the mid-150s per subject area and getting around a 4 on the writing piece. So that's like the average, but students are coming in on a wide range of things like that. It's important to understand at any school you're applying to how they use the GRE. And like I said, for us, for our school, we're using the GRE mainly to determine a yes or no answer. Can this applicant perform the coursework, yes or no? That's how we use it, but different schools will vary in that sense. Letters of recommendation. One challenge I see, and one thing that I see happen more frequently for international students, so I'm going to address it directly. A lot of times students feel that they should find the person with the highest title or the highest rank write them their letter of recommendation. And I would push back on that a little bit. What I would suggest is finding somebody who is in a position where they can comment on your academic ability, okay? So that might be a professor. It might also be someone for whom you've done academic work for, something along these lines. But it should be, in any case, it should be somebody who knows you, who can write a very genuine, candid letter of reference on your behalf. So it's better to have somebody of perhaps slightly lower status, but who knows you very well write a letter, rather than a form letter or like a generic letter that's very clearly just something that this person has signed for everybody else too. Receiving a generic letter of recommendation does not look very good on your application. So you want to, now's the time to really start cultivating those relationships and building those relationships so that when the time comes, you're able to request a letter of recommendation. That's a really important piece that we'd like to see. Some programs are going to require a resume, and this is important, especially if any of you are pursuing professional degrees like an MBA or a law program. We require resumes as well. And the reason we want to see this is, especially if you've had some space between your undergrad and the time you are pursuing a master's degree or a PhD, we like to see what you've done with that time. Again, each of these components is showing us how much preparation you have for the degree you're seeking. Again, we're looking to see how much preparation you've made and how adequate that preparation is, which will tell us how successful you might be in our program. And so we have a very rigorous curriculum here at Penn GSE. So we want to make sure that the students entering the programs really understand, really are able to hit the ground running. That's what most schools will want to see as well. And so the resume, the letters of recommendation, test scores, and transcripts all go to satisfying those questions that we might have as admissions officers. And then the final piece, I've already talked about the TOEFL. So the final piece, though, is the statement of purpose, okay? And that's telling us the why. That's letting us know a couple things. It gives us a good sense of your motivation, but more importantly, and I would argue most important, it lets us know that you understand the program to which you're applying. So I mentioned our statistics program before. That is not a business degree, but we get a lot of applications from students who are looking for a business degree. And their statement of purpose, when they describe that they're looking for a business degree, tells us that they are not the right fit for our program. So even though they might have the best test scores or excellent recommendations, if their interests are not truly aligned with our program, they might not be admitted. And so that's why that statement of purpose is so critical. And I would say that that's a difference between many US schools and UK schools that I've seen, having spoken with my colleagues working in the UK, for example. A lot of times they're focused very much on your academic competence, your test scores, your GPA, etc., and give less credence to, say, your motivation or your reasons for being there. Whereas in most US schools, we're looking at everything combined in a very holistic manner. That's what we're really looking at there. And so, again, these are the sort of the components. This is what's helpful. I would say, once you have put effort together, once you've created this application, just be sure that you're very aware of all the different nuance that you might encounter between different schools, because every school is unique and every program within a given school can also be different. So, like I said, Penn GSE has over 20 master's degrees, and some of them have deadlines. Many are admitting on a rolling basis. This is just an example, but different U.S. schools are going to be that way. So be sure you're aware of deadlines and other logistics. And then I am going to talk a little bit about scholarships here, because I know this is an area of interest, especially for international students. Well, for all students, right? But it's important to really understand that at different U.S. schools, they're all going to have their own policies regarding scholarship and student employment, student funding, and these types of things. So it's important to get a good understanding. Our scholarship policies are posted online, and the way it works at our school, for example, is when you apply for admission, that application for admission serves as your application for scholarship. So when you are admitted to Penn GSC, you would receive your admissions decision along with a scholarship decision. And so you'll know right away, you'll know immediately how much support the school is going to offer you. But not every school operates that way. Many times you'll have to submit a separate application for scholarship, or they might have some other process in place. Just the main takeaway is that you don't want to assume. Don't think that just because one school does it this way, all schools do it that way. Even to that end, don't assume that just because one program in a given school does it one way, all programs within that school do it that way. We have our programs offer graduate assistantships, for example, and these are paid positions where you can work with faculty on research projects, and we pay you $21 an hour. So as you can imagine, they are rather competitive. But each of the 20 master's degrees at Penn GSC operates that GA-ship a little bit differently. And so you would have to inquire directly with the program to understand how to take advantage of that. And I would suggest taking that same approach with any U.S. school that you're interested in. Reach out to their admissions office, reach out to their financial aid office, and really get an understanding of the requirements, the deadlines, and of course the scholarship opportunities. That's going to make you a much more successful candidate. And so EdUSA has kindly let me speak for a little bit about our programs here. I'm not going to go into tremendous detail, but I do want to highlight the programs that we do offer. Like I said, our programs are really broad in the sense that we offer programs that all fall under the general penumbra of education, but they address different aspects of that field. So everything from higher education management to mental health counseling to statistics and of course teaching. You can see here that our programs are many and varied, and so we offer a program. If you have an interest in some aspect of the field of education, then we most likely have a program for you, and I'm very happy to discuss our programs specifically with you on a one-on-one basis. But for now, that really concludes my formal presentation. I'm glad that so happy that you joined me tonight. I'm going to stick around and we can answer some questions that people might have about, of course, graduate education in the U.S. or making a strong application, and of course any questions you might have about Penn GSC itself.
Great, thank you, Jason, for this for your presentation. We do have some questions on the chat box.
Okay. Let me find the chat box.
Okay.
Where do I go? Chat. Okay. All right. I see it here. Okay. 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 Let me see. I guess the best way is I can read the question and then give my best answer. Is that how you think that might
Yes. Or if you want, I can read the question and then you can just answer.
Okay.
Luz Angelicas asks, I would like to know more about PhD scholarships available for international students.
Yeah, so that's a great question. PhD. So PhD funding, of course, is going to vary school by school. If there's one takeaway that you've gotten from my talk here is that every school in the US is very different in how they approach student funding and requirements. So in the US, there are programs that would require you to pay for a PhD, but at most of the top schools, at least, a PhD is going to be fully funded for a number of years. At Penn GSE, for example, we fund all of our PhDs for 4 years, and that means tuition, fees, health insurance, and a stipend that we pay over 9 months. I think last year's stipend was about $26,000. So it's not a huge salary, but it's a sufficient salary to help you get by while you're in your studies, okay? It's important to inquire with any school that you're interested in what their policies are, not just for PhDs, but for master's students as well.
Okay, Rodrigo asked, I have 2 questions that are not related to one another. And he said, I've been aiming to get admitted into a graduate program for 1 year now, so I have been preparing well ahead of time. However, with work and all it is very hard to meet all the requirements in time. What are your suggestions? Do you admissions boards know about this? Should I include it on my personal statement? And then number 2, if I don't need the minimum scores for the TOEFL before the deadline, can I send updated scores afterwards, having met the minimum required scores of course?
So that's a really interesting question. Oh, it says I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I muted yourself instead of myself.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, very good. So it's a good question. The way you would want to understand this is that in the US, at most schools, notice I'm always using that caveat because, like I said, US schools are over 5,000 of us, so they're all going to be a little bit different. But at most schools, your application is going to be reviewed once it is complete, okay? And what we mean by complete is that all the necessary components of that application are received. So, for example, at Penn GSE, we would require a TOEFL or IELTS score before even reviewing your application. And what that means, though, is that we are going to review the scores that you have submitted by the deadline, okay? In the case where you want to improve your test scores, you would need to make that improvement. You would need to make that improvement before the deadline, before submitting your application, okay? So once you've submitted your application, those are the scores that we're going to look at. That's what we're going to use. And we do that to ensure that we are being fair to all the other applicants as well, okay? If you have reason to believe that you will score much higher in a subsequent test, then it might be better to save your application to apply at a later date, okay? But usually, and I'll say this now, students are almost always really anxious about test scores. And I understand that it's a single data point that everybody obsesses over. But at most US schools, that's one of 5 or 6 data points that we use. So like I said before, it's not everything, okay? It's important, but it's not absolutely everything. In the case of, say, the TOEFL or the IELTS, their schools might be a bit more strict. We are a bit more strict in that sense. But again, that makes sense because all of our classes are taught in English. And more importantly, and this is an important aspect of American education, a large piece of your grade, usually upwards of 20 or 30% of your grade, is comprised of class participation. Okay? In the US, class participation is a huge piece of your overall grade. So it's important to ensure that you're able to communicate effectively and professionally in English so that you can actively participate. So that's why we're a bit stricter on, say, the TOEFL than we would be on maybe a GRE. But that's, again, program by program, school by school. Just keep that in mind.
Next question, it says, I graduated computer engineering from a university in Turkey, which is accredited by accreditation called MUBEK. by Signatory of Washington according signatories. I am planning for master's degree in computer science in USA, but my question is, although my GPA is 2.05, I'm studying for GRE. Is it possible for me to be accepted for a computer science graduate program if I have good scores from GRE and TOEFL? And I also wondered that if I could have a scholarship by the help of that good scores of GRE.
So every school is going to have its own criteria. Computer science is a fairly challenging curriculum. And so although I don't work in an engineering school or a computer science school, and I'm not directly competent to answer that specific question, what I can say is that admissions professionals at a given school, in this case for computer science, they will understand what a strong GPA, what a good or a good enough GPA would be in that field, okay? If I was looking at an education, someone studying education or something related, I would wonder if a 2.0 is sufficient. Okay, I would have to look at other aspects of the application before really making a determination that way. And then as far as the second question, that's a good question. It has to do with scholarships and whether and how schools evaluate students for scholarships. So most schools at the graduate level are going to offer merit scholarships, and that term merit is really defined very loosely. There's no standard uniform definition for that. But what we generally mean by that is how your application stands in contrast and in comparison with other applicants to the same program. Okay, and so how strong that looks in comparison to applicants in the same program. All right, that's how they would make that evaluation, how they would look at that. So just having a good score, well, what if everybody has a good score, right? So then it's hard to say, well, who's the more meritorious in that sense. So it's not just about test scores. If there's one thing I can hit home tonight, if there's one thing I can emphasize more than anything else, it's that every aspect of your application matters. So in the case of evaluation for scholarships, someone has a high test score. What if 5 people have the same test score? Well, then we might look at their resume, who has more experience. We might look at their statement of purpose, who really is more motivated. Okay, every piece of the application matters, and so it's important to really spend as much time as you can preparing adequately for them.
Great. Jason, will you be okay if we turn on your camera and you answer questions?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Then, okay, next question is from Mario. He's asking if Penn is a private university.
Yes, we are. So this is often a point of confusion. There is the Pennsylvania State University, which is a state school and located in State College, PA, which is a very nice kind of booming college town there. It's a great school. But UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, is a private Ivy League university located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So we are an urban school. We are located in the city. And Philadelphia, by the way, is the 5th largest city in the US. So I showed it on a map earlier in my presentation, but we're about 2 hours south of New York and 3 hours north of Washington, DC. And again, we're located right in the city, and we are, in fact, a private university.
There's another question. It says, I've been working in a field not related with the master's subject I want to study. What do you recommend to me in terms of my application?
Oh, that's a great question. And that goes to what I was saying earlier, that a lot of times, especially in the US, students will use a master's degree to pivot to a different career or change direction within a career. That's where your statement of purpose or your admissions essay, so to speak, is going to be really critical, really giving people a good understanding of where you're coming from and what you want to do, why you want to do this. I'll give you an example. We have a program in education entrepreneurship. It's kind of an amalgam between the business school and the education school. And so we have people coming who have been working in corporate America, working on Wall Street for a number of years, but they have a passion for education. They want to get involved and they're not sure how. And so in their essays and in what they're writing to us, they're telling us, well, I want to use my business skills to start something new in the education space. Okay, that's an example of what I would suggest doing. I would suggest really trying to explain, how did you come to this decision, and what skills do you have that might be relevant. You might not have studied the specific subject, but if you have skills that pertain to it, or experience that can segue into it, that can be really relevant. And keep in mind too that it's not always necessary to have a background per se in this. It's perfectly fine in most cases. Okay, again, I have to throw the caveats, but in most cases, it's perfectly fine to chart a new course and use a master's degree to do that. So I hope that helps.
Grecia is asking, did you guys have a biomedical engineering master's and PhD? And what are the options of scholarships for international students?
So yes, I can say that UPenn has a program like that. I don't work at that particular school. Remember, there's 12 colleges within the university, so unfortunately I cannot comment directly on that program per se. But what I can say is that PhDs at Penn are fully funded for both domestic and international students, and that's true for any of the 12 graduate colleges. I would suggest as a follow-up, I would suggest reaching out to the School of Engineering or the School of Arts and Science to inquire about those programs. At the PhD level, you're going to find that a lot of times the curriculum overlaps between different schools sometimes, so it's important to get a good understanding of how that would work, and at any school you might be considering.
Okay, Lucia is asking, what elements should a good statement of purpose have? Generally, I understand that we should make evident that we understand the program we're applying to and that we are a good fit for it, but anything else that might be relevant.
So, it's important. What I'll say about this, it's important to understand the difference between to really distinguish between, say, an essay you might write as an undergraduate student applying to a college versus one you might write to a graduate program specifically. And really the biggest difference has to do with focus. Okay? It's focus on the program itself and you. Okay, so as opposed to presenting yourself as this well-rounded person, that's what we usually use in the undergrad world. In this case, what we're really looking for is a focus and an understanding of where you see yourself. No, you don't need to come in with a full life plan charted out, but it should be evident that you have thought carefully about where you want your career or your life to go, and then how this particular program will help you achieve that. We want to see how we fit in with your life as much as you fit in with us. Okay, that's really what this comes down to. So it's good to be specific. Okay, it's good to be very clear and candid also about what your desires are, what you're looking for, because if you try to tell us what you think we want to hear, it's going to come off as very disingenuous. And also, it's self-defeating after all. You want to go to the best program. So part of our role, don't think of us as gatekeepers necessarily, okay? It's really about more like matchmaking. We want to figure out how you fit in and if we're the best fit for you. Because if we're not, some other school will be, okay? You're going to go a lot farther in a program that you're a better fit for. So I hope that helps.
I would like to comment something on that. For Lucia, this event, we usually have other online events that talk about specifically essays for graduate applications. So I will type my email on the bottom of the comments. If you want, you can reach out to me and I can let you know about our next event online where you can learn more about this. And we do also have a lot of resources like online in our YouTube channel or other documents that you can have access to if you have more questions on the essays. Okay.
That's that's a good point, because you know that would be a good topic of its own seminar. I mean, any of these aspects you could probably dedicate an entire seminar to.
Rodrigo is asking, what is the score required in the case of taking the IELTS exam?
Well, every school will be different. Okay, again, you have to realize that every school will be different. But at Penn GSE, we look for a minimum of a 7. Okay, for the IELTS, and again, for the language scores, we're going to be a little stricter on those just because of the nature of the curriculum. But again, it'd be a 100 on the TOEFL and a 7 on the IELTS overall.
And then Mario is asking, what is the admission rates you pay for graduate studies? And do you use wait list in case some admitted students choose another university?
Right. So I'll answer the second question first. So some of our programs will waitlist students and others will not. Okay. It kind of goes to what I was saying about every program. Even different programs within a school can have different policies. Okay. Because that leads into the first question. So remember, at the graduate level, you're not so much applying to a school as you're applying to a program. Okay. And that really influences admission rates, if you think about it. Because at the undergrad, you have many thousands of students applying to a whole school versus very specific programs that students might be applying to. Again, we're not gatekeepers so much as we're matchmakers, is how I try to think of that. So admission rates, I'm not sure what that would actually tell you. Okay, if you're trying to gauge your likelihood of being admitted, I think a better place to start would be looking again at your own transcripts, your own history, your own motivation. Okay, if you are prepared for the coursework that you are applying to, then you stand a good chance of being admitted. Okay, we are at the graduate level. We're really looking for people that understand the program, that understand the work necessary to complete the program, and that are adequately prepared. It's not a it's not this game we play at the undergrad level. Okay, I would say that, and I'll give you a concrete example of why admission rates can be somewhat misleading too, even if we were to publish them, which we don't even track them, by the way, for individual programs. But again, thinking of that statistics program I mentioned, remember how I said that we get a lot of applicants who are really looking for an MBA, right? We can tell by their essay and by everything they've done. They're really looking for a business degree. Well, that is we offer an applied statistics degree in the social sciences in education, okay? It's not a business degree. So we have to, even though those students are all qualified technically, we have to reject their applications because we are not the program they're looking for. So that program might seem to have a very selective admission rate, okay? But that's partly because we simply can't admit people that aren't a good fit, okay? Because we're not the program they're looking for. It has nothing to do with their credentials. I know that's where that question is usually where that question is leading from. Is, well, should I apply? Can I apply? How do I gain my chances? It's better just to think carefully before choosing a program, evaluate yourself, evaluate where you're coming from, and then go from there. Because if you demonstrate the requisite basic capabilities and motivation, you stand a good chance of being admitted. So I hope that helps.
Okay, and I think this is our last question.
Okay.
It says, I am a biologist applying for a PhD in neurobiology or neuroscience. Do you recommend to contact the PIs I am interested to work with before applying to the program?
So not immediately, okay? Here's what I would say. Remember that in the US, at the PhD level, one of our faculty actually described this very well, and I'll use his example or his explanation. Especially at the PhD level, you're not so much applying to you're not applying to a school. You're not even so much applying to a program. What you're applying to is to work with specific faculty, okay? Because that is who's going to admit you in a doctoral program, at least at any of the top schools, okay? So the first step is to really gauge whether or not there are faculty in a given program or in a given school that are studying the same, whose research is aligned with your research. Okay, that's really the first step. And in that case, keep in mind that faculty may not be housed in the program that you might think they are. So, for example, we have faculty, we have statisticians, okay, faculty of mathematics, but they're housed in the School of Education because their focus of their research is in education, okay? So understanding that they might be working in different areas, it's better to look for specific faculty, look at specific research topics and start at that point. Then reach out to the admissions office first, okay? They're going to help guide you, and they're going to help basically introduce you to the relevant PIs or faculty or whomever. You have to understand most faculty are very, very busy. They're inundated with questions and calls. So it's important, it's helpful to have the admissions office work as a liaison of sorts to help guide the conversation a little bit and then hand off when appropriate. That's how I would pursue it. So first, beginning by looking at your research and then finding faculty whose work aligns with yours, okay? And then reaching out to the admissions office in which they work, okay? Not necessarily even the school that you think you should apply to, but where those people are working. That might be a good step, rather than just cold calling, right? That helps.
Okay, I think those were all of the questions.
Okay, wonderful.
So
Well,
thank you so much everyone for joining this webinar today. I will make sure to send you the recording of this webinar in case you want to watch it again for your reference. And then Jason has provided his email if you want to reach out to him if you have any further questions. Thank you so much, Jason, for your time and for answering all these questions.
Thank you so much, Yandi, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We look forward to hearing more of your questions in the future. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.